What's up with me? Let's see. Want to raise your voice? Robert's just joining.
Hello, Annie. Hi, Kathryn.
Hey, Robert. I'm finishing my breakfast. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Mm. So Annie asked what was up with me, and I just got off two calls this morning. The first one was really lovely. A guy named Glenn Perry,
Yeah. Glenn Perry.
Parry,
Perry. Uh-huh.
and he's written a series of books. Um,
Ooh,
the original thinking. And what he said was that thinking was historically actually meant thanking, which was a very interesting concept.
now, would you repeat that, please?
That thinking actually originally meant thanking,
Thanking. Hmm.
Thanking. So that was an interesting thing to noodle around. Then he wrote Original Politics, which was, as I understand it, talking generally about politics as sacred and as being connected to source. And then his last book is Original Love,
Hmm.
talking about love as source and how it brings things together.
I
So
like that.
it
Love as
was,
source.
yeah, he had some really interesting things to say. I'm going to explore him some more. He is a man who's half Basque and half Jewish.
Half what?
Basque,
I didn't get that word.
Basque, Basque, I believe.
I
Um,
don't I
it's
don't
a
know what that means.
it's a group of people who live in the mountains between Spain and France,
Okay.
and it's a whole culture.
Wow.
Um,
Cool.
and his grandmother from that culture in particular really helped seat him in older ways of being in the world that were more nature centered. So that gave him a real opening to respecting and valuing indigenous wisdom, which he's now spent a great deal of his life involved with. Um, so that was a really rich conversation. And then I went to another group, which is all about values. And I'm just feeling how empty those concepts are really for most people. This group has picked six values. They do that every year, and they spend the year exploring them. That's all fine. It has no real context. It has no
Hmm.
real grounding. Um, this year they want to talk about taking action, and and they're not integrating taking action with their values. I mean, they my thought was they should, if they've picked six values, then you take a value and you explore what it means to you, what it looks like in the world, how you act on it. And then
Hmm.
if you want to bring in other people, you can bring in other people to help you deepen that conversation. Um, I don't know if they're going to do that. That doesn't sound like they're going to bring in speakers for sure. It's called US Values Alliance is what it is. And I'm
Hmm.
also thinking, also, given where we are as a country, the US Values Alliance doesn't ring with a great deal of hope and enthusiasm. It just doesn't. And the rightish crowd is slowly moving in a direction where they're bringing in spirituality.
The what crowd?
The right leaning crowd. And there's another, because this is another thing this morning. A group called Act 17 is full of tech entrepreneurs who are sort of searching for meaning in their work. And it's being led by a guy named Trey, and I don't remember his last name, who just happens to be the CEO of a very large our ammunition manufacturing group.
Hmm.
So here is a man invested in killing who's trying to be Christian.
Lord.
I find a certain hysterical hyperbole in that. And he, I mean, and he says things like, well, our mind is very good at getting us to rationalize things, and so we don't really understand the truth of what we're doing. I mean, and that's so true. And he doesn't see that that's what he's doing. That he, I mean, I don't know how you can create those two if you really come from a Christ consciousness. It just doesn't compute. And yet, there they are touting and exploring, trying to be Christians and making their business spiritual and not paying attention to the kind of business they're doing. I mean, there's a certain schism there.
Waste. It's waste.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of that because that's part of for me of why so many people see Trump as spiritual and as the savior and all of that because it justifies all of these behaviors because they're doing it for the higher good without any sense of that dissonance between the impact of what they're doing and what they claim they want to have happen. And they're just not at all aware of that. And if the values group that I was talking about would be willing to explore that, I could see relevance in their work. But and I was just quite, I mean, I don't know how to contribute to that group. I truly don't. The values they've chosen, two of them, honor and fortitude, in my world speak of two very different value systems. Okay, that's already a problem. And then they have compassion, hope, and trust are the others. And for me, compassion, hope, and trust are emerging properties. They're not values in themselves. They're really emerging properties that come from a well-lived value space.
If I may,
Yep.
what comes to me as what all that is simply a form of masturbation. It's like it ain't going nowhere, it ain't coming from nowhere. It's just doing something because you don't know what else to do. And I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. Surely we have something better to do than that kind of exploration. I don't, I can't even honor it by calling it an exploration. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I like your connection to self, to that kind of limited self-love that masturbation is. There's nothing like wrong with it. It's just really narrow.
Right. Yeah,
it's really
it just
narrow.
ain't going nowhere. Yeah,
and it doesn't give you that connection or relationship.
No, it's empty. It's not. It has no fortitude or it ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
Because it ain't coming from nowhere.
Well, it's a lack of relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was, let me see if I can get to my notes. That was something that came up with one of the things he said is that love brings us toward wholeness. And that wholeness is all about relationship.
Well, love doesn't bring us toward wholeness. Love is wholeness.
So
to me.
Right. So that experience, though, is a bringing toward, is what I would do to justify his statement. And I think that's what's so missing, is that we are still doing all these compartments and people see values as these very special, different, separate things. They have no real connection to each other or to other things. They're just so you can be trusting. How can you be trusting without a whole slew of other stuff behind it. Trust is what happens when you have this experience of all these other things. Without that, trust doesn't exist. It's not a thing you create. You know, it's like you don't create love. It's an experience that you are in, and then it colors everything that you do. Um, and it's just that abstractness that just kind of drives me crazy. I find it really hard to work with values people for that reason, because it's not, none of the values are really connected. They're not part of a whole. They're just feathers on a bird, you know? They're pretty feathers and they've got great colors, and it's the bird that you really want to be involved with. And the bird's missing.
That brings up an initial question that I have is why can values only be conceived of in terms of human values, human
Yes,
needs, human actions, activities? Because in fact, looked
yes,
at that point of view, it's totally destructive.
yes. Yeah, that was something else that Glenn brought up, that the greater good has become defined as greater human good.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the problem, that
That
that's
is a
when
real
you,
problem because
yeah,
we can't afford to do that anymore.
yeah, yeah,
Imminent death if we follow along
yeah,
that trajectory.
yeah. And that's why the language is so confusing, because you can say those words, greater good, and if you're talking about human good, it's one thing. And if you're talking about the whole of life, it's a whole other thing. It totally changes the conversation. And without that recognition, you can feel like you're saying the same things and you're not. And I see that so much in the far right spirituality. They've taken a lot of the words from the left and have twisted them or emptied them of meaning, maybe is even a better, of connection, because they're not really connected to the same kind of thing. So they feel proud of themselves, you know, because they're doing the right thing as it's been defined by culture, with total lack of understanding of what that means in reality and how it actually addresses the real world. Um, because it's so human centered. And then the human center gets even narrower. It's our group, you know, we've taken that and just made it smaller and smaller and smaller, and it becomes less and less satisfying or impactful or relevant.
Yeah.
I just think people don't know what to do with themselves anymore.
And I think you're really right. You're really right. Oh, okay. This is another article this morning. They are talking about how humans have energy, that so many people feel fatigued. So how does that happen? What does that mean biologically? How does that happen biologically is what they're exploring.
I don't understand what you just said.
So this article was about how, trying to understand scientifically from a biological perspective, why people
That just makes me laugh. It's like that. That's that. That's like masturbation to me.
well, in a sense it is, but hear me out. So so what they're saying is that they're trying to figure out why people feel fatigued. So what is
Fatigue or petite? What'd you say?
fatigue? Lack of
Fatigue.
energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So why do people feel they have a lack of energy? And where does that come from? So does it mean that they aren't getting enough physical nutrition? So their body doesn't have the nutrition to feel energized. And what they're kind of, so they're working with the mitochondria in the cells, which are what provides energy for us.
Right.
So what they're coming around to, although the article didn't explicitly say this, is that there is a connection between feelings and emotions and how much energy we have. Because you can change, you can go from having no energy to having lots of energy in a minute when your mind creates a different understanding of your relevance in the physical world. When you're going from having to do something to something that really sparks your imagination, all of a sudden your energy is released. And so they're trying to figure out how biologically that works and what that means. So that's really, for me, a connection to everything we've been talking about, because when you're connected to love, when you're connected to source, when you feel that engagement with relationship, that those all those things really help you experience, there's a lot of energy that's in those situations. When you feel separated from stuff, when you feel like you're slugging along, it's very much about individual. You're separated again from that relationship, from that connection. And so you're not fed by those other things. And one of the things they said in the article is that people who are forced to exercise past their comfort level will do that if they have support, if they have a person alongside them saying, yes, you can do it. Yeah, they will go farther than people who are just doing it on their own, which is sort of proof to me of that concept, although they're not really making those connections. But that's why it's so key for me that we really do maintain that connection to the more than human, because that relationship, that interaction with the more than human is what supports our energy, our aliveness, our ability to really function well in the world. And without that, it becomes depleted and contrived and all that kind of stuff. And I think we reach out for that when we're looking for friends, when we're looking for people who think like us. All of that is a way to, a very shallow way to find that. And I think this chaos that we're in is going to force us to go deeper, because it's so chaotic that the shallowness is not going to be sufficient to carry us through. Anyway.
I agree with that.
So to your point, Annie, it may be a lot of masturbation, but the thing about masturbation is it makes you know you can feel good if you do right things. and you also can see the limits of it, so it kind of leaves you wanting to make it more a partnership in some way. It's not really sufficient, and that insufficiency even in the process. So it's a step.
Sorry, I'm late.
Who's that?
That's Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Hi, hello. Sorry, I'm late, but obviously came into the middle of a very interesting ideas.
It's hard to understand your words.
I I said it's sorry I'm late, and clearly I've come into a middle of a important conversation. But one question is, did you use the term more than human?
Yes.
And what is that? Was that part of what you were explaining in the beginning? What do you mean by more than human?
So it's actually a term that came out of the indigenous community.
What's the term?
More than human.
Oh.
To reconnect us with other life forms on the planet, and to recognize that we are a small part of that, instead of we're still the top and it's nice that we're connecting. Don't you all appreciate our reaching down to you, as opposed to understanding that we are a small part of the other part of life on the planet. And so they are definitely more than human. There is more of them than us. Yeah.
Is it more?
Excuse me. I'm having a call come in that I've got to take.
Okay.
So
right.
I'll be back. Okay. Bye.
So more than human means it's not an idea of we need to be more than our baseline humanness, but There's more of non-humans than humans.
I think it has
Well,
many meanings. I mean, because
it's
there certainly is more of them than us. There's more other than human on the planet than humans. Even with our 8 billions, we're still a small part of the life on the planet. But I think from the indigenous perspective, it also talks about um, life experience. They often make the reference to the huge amounts of years of life that has gone into the previous um, life forms, that they carry that knowledge with them, which is why they have a wisdom that we don't have, because our life form is very short on this planet. And so we don't have that amount of wisdom that we've accrued as a species, because we're younger. So I think they're talking about the wisdom as well.
yeah.
Um,
the the um the um the importance of ancestors
yeah, yeah,
is part of what is, I think, part of
yeah,
how they honor and acknowledge that wisdom.
yes. Yeah.
Um,
And today, Carl, on Humanity Rising, Glenn Perry spoke about how he felt that when Western art discovered linear perspective, it changed everything. And I was thinking of you. I'm sure you would really have appreciated what he had to say about that.
sounds familiar.
Yeah, that
How does
linear, and he's saying exactly what you're saying, that that we discovered that linear perspective. It took Europe by storm, and then we decided that that was reality when it's not. And he said something also very interesting, that the ancients saw the past as in front of us because we could see it, and the future as behind us because we can't see it. We don't have eyes to see it. And with linear perspective, that got shifted, that got changed, because we could then see into the future. And so we started to try and predict and control the future, as opposed to being surprised and delighted by it.
yeah. Yeah. Robert, I don't know if I've ever, if you're interested, I can, I've ever shared my writings about the history of how linear perspective is, and what happened in 1413 to say that was invented in 1413 and its influence on art and architecture and urban design. If you're interested, I can send it to you. I don't know if I have.
I'm aware of that distinction, that event in history, but I haven't read anything, at least
But
recently.
well, there's not there's the amount out there is thin, but but I have some of my own writings that I can share with you.
Oh, no, no, I understood, and that'd
Yeah,
be wonderful.
yeah.
I mean, because I think, when I was in college studying art, I'm sure that was brought up at that point because it sounded familiar. But I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, the way I think about it and talk about it is that in architecture school we are taught to draw perspectives,
Right.
and we were taught not just in architecture school but in our culture that perspective is true, that somehow it's God given, it's a priori, blah blah blah. And because I was reading more history than that was good for me, I came across this little interesting point that it was invented in 1413. And there's an event that Brunelleschi did. There's a thing that Brunelleschi did in 1413 that locked in the rules. The rules of all parallel lines vanish to the same vanishing point, blah blah blah, all that. So he
Yeah.
did something. There was something very specific that he did in 1413 that kind of wowed everybody.
You
Yeah.
wrote a book.
No, he did a he did a a demonstration.
I think you've shown us that where he had this machine that would actually draw perspective.
No,
Um,
that was the that machine was Dürer, a Dutch German painter,
Okay.
and that the first one was 1500. Because I think I actually have. Oh, I have a diagram that explains that I can put in the chat. You know what's really good about just this total sidebar here. I love Zoom. Zoom is so much better than Google Meets.
Oh, yes.
I mean, but one thing is that you can actually attach.
Yeah.
Um, so this is what this is a quick diagram what he did. He made a painting of the baptistry in Florence, which is an octagon. And he put a peephole in at the vanishing point, and you just stand. The demonstration was you stand at a certain point in the piazza, if you will, and then you're looking at the building, and then you put a mirror. You hold a mirror to see the reflection of the painting. So this is what he did to kind of. You could talk about this as it's really clever marketing. That part of it was part of the way he got people excited about it. So I'm sorry.
It's an excellent drawing. It's very descriptive.
Well, the other part, this is getting to a sidebar here, but the other thing he did that was very slick marketing is that he for the sky in the painting he used a mercury or sort of silver paint that would like a mirror. And so as people were looking at it, they actually saw the clouds moving in the painting. So it gave it it gave this quality of being more real than real.
Well, this may be a sidebar, but what you were just saying, but I think how it ties into our previous discussion is very clear that it was a man-made artifact. It was a technique developed so that we could more truly claim what we were looking at. Values, claiming it for ourselves, this is wonderful, this is lovely. I guess those are values, appreciation, and then that just defines it. Whereas, no, you're looking at a love flower. It's completely, its whole existence is completely different from what you're just, pinpointing by using such value concepts. And so I think it's very much aligned with this discovery of perspective.
Well, I look forward to I'll share these writings and some stuff with you because I'd love your thoughts. But one of the conclusions that I have come to over these years is that it's not necessarily that perspective is a wrong thing, but the most important thing is to acknowledge that this, and it's not just perspective, but when we assume a system that we have created is sort of above us or beyond us, we forget that we follow these rules, and we live in this as if the rules are from God or something.
Right.
But we forget that there are rules. And if we forget that we are them, there are rules, then we're trapped in this we're imprisoned by the limitations of our own rules. So our rules are limiting us from discovering other insights, others' perspectives, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's very prevalent. I'm astounded sometimes how easily we brush by, within the concepts of values, we brush by the values of another society, a social system, are totally different from what ours are here.
Yeah.
But we assume that ours are, well, maybe better, but even if we're not, if we're not concluding that, we're assuming that ours went way back. When if you read closely, letters from, the early 1800s or 1700s in this country, you find very different concepts, applied to so-called values. Called the same thing, but, apparently very different.
Well, this is another. I think this is. I'm looking forward to hearing your insights but this is. And this is what you're saying is another. I go insight conclusion I've come from asking these questions, which is, once you realize, for me, when you understand that these systems that are controlling us are our systems, and part of that understanding is there are other systems from other people. Chinese perspective, for example, Chinese art. It's we need to acknowledge that we are not better than our system isn't better than theirs. It's just different. And just as a historical point, I'm still shocked today. Just a couple of years ago, talking to a woman who was finishing her master's in painting at Claremont colleges, and she had been taught that the idea that Western art, Western perspective is more refined, more accurate, more real than Chinese. She's still learning. There are people learning that Chinese art is flat, not as sophisticated, which is nothing aside from we shouldn't. I mean, that's an educated person doing what you're saying, but to call Chinese art flat and less sophisticated really misses the point because it's dynamic.
Got to take this just a sec.
Yeah, what you're reminding me of, Carl, is I was on another call recently, and they were sharing that there's been a new understanding of the cave paintings. And they've done, using computers, they're able to clarify the lines and you can see them all together. And what the cave paintings were doing was showing motion. So you'd have a horse with two heads in different positions and four legs or six legs. And when they actually put them together by the computer, you could see the animal move. It was eating grass or it was running. And that's how they showed that motion was by making additional appendages. So you could see everything at the same time in the same.
Wow.
The
What
other
does that remind me of? Cubism?
well, and animation.
And animation, but yeah. But so Cubism, showing the same thing in different time.
Right.
In time.
And what you're also making me think of is Newton, because one of the defining points of the Renaissance was removing our society from its embeddedness in nature. And part of that embeddedness had inherent in that embeddedness that there were certain rules, that you didn't do certain things that would upset the status quo, that you stayed within those, what were seen then as constraints. And it's true of any relationship. It has constraints around it because it means that if you're in a relationship, the other is as important as you. And so there are certain things that you might want to do that you defer or desist from because it is uncomfortable or inappropriate for the other person, the other that you're involved in. Maybe that other's a tree.
Yeah.
And so this sense of stepping outside the rules, which is what the Renaissance is all about, it othered nature in order to allow us to go outside of the constraints that respect for nature had put us in And it's given us the freedom, if you will, or the chance, the opportunity to explore what it's like outside of those restrictions. And now we're starting to see that there were some value in some of those things. Um, I mean, a simple example is, why should I be nice to somebody? Why can't I just express my anger or disdain or frustration or whatever it is, and be polite? So we have people who are stepping outside of those constraints and are being really nasty to people, and they're relearning, shall I say, the results of that, that other people don't like to be othered. And that's going to impact your relationship. They're not going to do things for you. They're not going to hold you in that same sense of relationship when you step outside the boundaries of what makes a relationship work. And they can blame you for not understanding them. They can blame you for not caring about them. But the truth is that their behavior makes it appropriate for them to not do that, because you're not maintaining the rules of the relationship that would encourage them to do that. So rules work both ways. They're not a one-way street. And our testing of those, but not being aware of that testing, really reduces our agency. Because from your, I mean, what you've been saying, when we create the rules, when we understand we're creating the rules, we have the capacity, the agency, the ability to change them. But if we don't understand that agency, we're a victim.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
We when we accept the rules as is, as culture teaches us, when we assume that they are given to us by God, we've given up the agency.
But even when they've been given to us by God, we still have, see, that's where free will comes. That's the whole thing with free will, is that God has set up these criteria. We have free will to agree or not agree. We stepped out of that garden by saying, we're not going to agree to this rule. We're not going to agree to pay any attention to the more than human world. We're going to focus on the human world. Thank you so much. And that's what we've done. And then we vetch about the what happens with that, because the rest of the world is responding to that. They have to. And that pushes us out because we're not in relationship. And so we get the pain of that exclusion and blame them for casting us out instead of understanding it was us. It's just lovely. It's hilarious. It's sad. It's all those things. But that's the way back into the garden, is to taking that responsibility and being able to discern the value of rules at whatever level you wish to take them, and the implications of those rules at whatever, and then deciding whether that's what you want or not. That's kind of like free will. Being able to do that instead of just doing it automatically, as more than kin does. They just do it automatically. They don't think about it. We're able to think about it, and that's a blessing and a curse.
You know how so many people have absolute terror, in relationship to snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, they should.
I've got to tell you, no. I would go and sit closer to rattlesnakes just so I could feel their energy.
Oh, man.
And it was amazing. It was like nothing else I've ever experienced in a mammal.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not stupid. I was sitting outside of its striking range and watched for it to,
Is that 5 feet or?
6 feet or so, and watching whether they would tighten.
Longer than it is.
Yeah. And Yeah, it depends how long it is.
But you would sit there like
But
cross your
there's a
legs.
hole out in the desert. Yeah, I found one sunning itself, just sat there for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes and feeling that energy. Actually, there was another time in Arizona. Um, anyway, it
Wait,
was
wait.
it was so well worth the experience that I just have to question, you know, why this became such a constant and total belief, that they can be dangerous. Another time I was walking up to a big old um, rattlesnake. It was on a pathway, and I turned this corner, and this morning sun, it was nice and warm and toasty. I was hiking with a big pack, and I saw this snake, and I jumped back. The snake did exactly the same thing. It wasn't coiled, so it could not strike forward, but somehow it mimicked my jump backwards. And I sat there and laughed for quite some time as I realized what had happened. And the snake slithered away as if it had its tail between its legs.
Um,
I mean, I could not see it in any other way. But it made it humanized the whole situation for me.
it went back to his family and told them, and they all
I'm
laughed.
sure. There's a whole story we could tell, Carl.
No, but the snake did too. But when you were sitting there, watching the snake and feeling its energy, did you get any? Did you had a sense that it was aware of you also?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would at time, just like my cat, when I get too close. See, she's all black, and when she was young, I tended to sit on her or something. I didn't see her. And so even now that she's she's 17 plus years, I sit down next to her and she sort of murmurs, and so that I can hear her and the snake did the same thing. But it was like a hissing sound.
Um,
But it wasn't tensing. I mean, I was just very, very gentle.
um, when we were doing the work with the project in Orange County, I mean, a really extraordinary thing that we I learned from my friend and Jack, my friend, was many conversations with the spiritual leader of the Hashiman, the Orange County tribe, who were the people who her ancestors had lived on that site,
Yeah.
and they're relocated to build San Juan Capistrano Mission. And I'm sort of imagining or thinking what that she said. But so one thing might be is that you have snake energy, or those snakes were your ancestors.
Well, they
I
are
could
ancient.
imagine her saying that.
Mhm.
Um,
I've always loved snakes.
yeah.
I still
and
don't
they are
trust myself
ancestors.
to handle, venomous snakes because I've never had the training and or the real inclination. But other than that, at my distance, I truly do enjoy them.
You're clearly getting closer in respecting or wanting to connect to them more than most people.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because it is
Yeah.
one of the singular, judgments that people simply grow up with, and it is fixed for life.
Yeah.
One of the stories she told us was I mean, there was so much great stuff about how, the difference between an eagle and a crow and how they see the earth. But she told the story of in a recent past, at another development that they were not able to stop near Orange County on the coast. The developers discovered a large number of Indian bones. It was a burial site. And they initially, this was just so there wasn't enough archaeological analysis done before. But initially they just bagged these bones up and put them, stacked up outside the construction trailer.
Hmm.
And the Native American community got involved, and various actions. They got the developers to create a park, a grass area, a mound that they reinterred the bones. And she says that in the process of when they were preparing the ground and putting the bones back into the ground, there was always a coyote was always watching them every day. We'd go there and watch them.
Wow.
And then they had it was done. They had a celebration, a ceremony. And the next day they came out and the coyote was there on top of the mound dead.
Wow.
And that sounds like she made that up, but I completely trust her, and I completely want to believe that this is how things are if we are open to those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Because
Um,
we are connected. I mean, we run over those connections. We don't pay attention. We dismiss them
yeah,
instead of honoring them. Yeah. It makes
I
you
mean,
so rich to have those connections.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me share that, because I think both of you. This is kind of what we're talking about. Is we have to be aware of that. Those, we have to aware and open to.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I hear the habit of separating oneself from that experience as a way of sharing it with others who might disbelieve, and therefore sort of protecting that disbelief space, um, so that it's not a challenging kind of situation. And I've had people who were not comfortable with accepting the more than human world, and the scoffing that goes with that, and the disparagement that goes with that. And the question I mean, we worry about being alone, and then every time we have a connection, we go, it's like you can't have it both ways. If you're in relationship and connected, then you have to honor that. You have to do what makes that connection stronger, richer, more vital, more relevant. Um, and that totally changes our behavior. And that means we have to deny ourselves some of the things that our little ego wants to do. I'm thinking particularly about cutting down trees right now. I've lost 3 or 4 trees in my block that harbored spirits. And so with the loss of those trees also goes those spirits. And they're such glowing, joyful, life-loving energy that it really depletes the neighborhood when they're gone. And yet, because people don't have that experience, aren't open to that experience, it's just a tree. And the poverty that brings is not recognized as such. It's felt that it's poorer, that the tree isn't there, but you don't really know or understand what that is. And that loses our agency in keeping the world the way we want it, because we don't recognize the loss of that life when it disappears. And we don't recognize how to keep that life available to us, which is something we can do.
Yeah, it's. I hope this isn't um hope this is appropriate, but back to art. I think of Renaissance art compared to the Impressionist. So what modern art is about in starting with the Impressionist and or the cave paintings, is a painting of a tree is not the tree. And the Impressionists, what they wanted to do was to expose or to increase our awareness that a painting of the tree is not the trees. So they painted a tree purple, or they allowed their emotional response to a tree, which I think is some level of what you're, it's in that direction of what you're talking about. It's acknowledging that a tree has an energy of life. And of course, loving a tree is a lot smarter than loving a snake, because the tree is not going to leap at you. That's just that's a joke. That's just a joke.
Around here in this town, they can fall on you.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really interested in this, the idea that the idea of the past is what we know. I mean, that we can see the past, that sort of flipping of
that it's in front of us. Why? Yeah. Yeah, I'm very taken with Glenn Perry. I really want to read some of his work. And it is kind of fun. He's spent some time at California Institute of Integral Studies, which I spent some time teaching at as well. So it's a nice connection.
just a self-promotion. So Robert, the book that I need to write,
One of them.
one of them, is The History of Perspective and Perspective Machines. And this the stuff I'll send you is includes an article that really got me, like, really cemented the idea of the history of perspective machines. And because it's through these machines that have both cemented the idea that this perspective thing is a rational system outside of us, but they've also they've had this enormously influential part of our world. So the history of perspective machines includes survey instruments that were used in the European colonialists or explorers to dominate people, measure resources. The camera. I mean, so this, but so this what I found. I Googled perspective machine and Galileo. I was just kind of to understand the connection between perspective machines and science. And this is what I found was an article that included a letter from Galileo to this Italian architect from the 1600s. So it's 100 years after Drewer's perspective machine. And the machine is, and we have these really kind of very complex armatures. And I mean, it wasn't just a picture frame that you look through. But then just that it's the idea of machine, they made it really clear that they, like, perspective machine, they were looking for mechanisms to rationalize drawing and measurement. And the other insight from this is that for them, drawing and measuring were the same thing.
So how does that relate to AI?
I think, well, that's the first thing I would say is that because on the road to AI is VR and AR, the artificial viewing things, technologies.
Augmented reality.
Those are absolutely part of the history of perspective machines, and the fact that they still rely on those rules that Brunelleschi established in 1413, which is, to me, is shocking. Like, can't we aren't we done with this yet? but and so the AI is, you know, I think AI is another technology that is my impression, within this way of thinking. It's another system that we believe is outside of us, but it is us. That's
Mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, you triggered another thought, but it disappeared, so I'll have to come back.
Well,
By the way, I've got to join something exactly at 2:30. Just giving
Okay.
well, you have 2 hours.
really?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
my
it's
clock says
My clock.
11:25. Yeah.
forever. Um,
Hmm. Well, glad you were able to join us, Robert.
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit disjointed today for me. I mean, for me as well as for Ani, who,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
her call.
Yeah. Well, she called at 10 o'clock and I was on another call, couldn't take it. So
Robert, what part is disjointed for you? I mean,
Oh, just that I got a call from
oh,
contractor that's helping me with my project here. I had to. He can be hard to get, so. I
yeah.
had to talk. But and then having this right on at the 2:30 mark. Um, Oftentimes it's pretty flexible either end.
well, I had to get ready for an important business call for 12, but it was great to talk about perspective and snakes all in the same conversation. There's a
Well, yeah, I could get into mosquitoes as well.
oh God. How do you feel about teddy bears or something? More of the
Yeah.
cute cuddly
They're
things.
alive. I mean, I grew up with pet animals, that parakeets. I love parakeets.
Yeah.
That's a whole other.
So we had dogs, and I don't think we've ever had cats, but we always had dogs.
We had dogs and cats, which is I just this is my favorite story about my parents was the driving from New Mexico to New York, upstate New York, near Olean. So you with 6 kids in a Volkswagen minivan and 2 full-size collies and 2 Siamese cats. Like, and I lay this out and like give me some evidence that your parents were more patient than my parents. It's like, I, I mean, I know we did it, but I can't even comprehend driving 2,000 miles.
Well, I'm going to go and prepare.
Okay.
That's a
Bye-bye.
good place to end, and I will see you in a week.
Okay.
See you.
Bye-bye.
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 How did you meet Robert?
Robert was a really good friend, again, of another person, and I can't remember how I met Virginia. Virginia Swan. She has been working with the UN doing leadership stuff, and she had a dream, I guess, a vision of a phoenix rising out of the ashes of 911, and that put her on a mission. So the phoenix is really big for her, and it's big for me in a lot of ways as well. And somebody connected me to her, and she was doing these calls, and Robert was on the calls. And so, yeah, so they've been together for decades.
When did you meet him? Oh, after 9/11.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's still in the process and it's always been virtual. I've never
Yeah.
met him in person. Yeah.
No, I just wanted a chime on that, but
Oh, yeah, I don't know. We've been friends for, 4 or 5 years, I guess. Maybe more. Yeah.
um, well, always energizing. Let's maybe talk this evening.
Okay, let me check and see. I think that's okay. Yeah, I do think
It's nothing urgent,
Yes.
but just if you wanted to touch base.
Yeah. That will be good. I'm what was I I don't know. It's been an interesting day. Interesting day. I was talking values this morning. I heard got introduced to Glenn Perry this morning. He's not a person I was familiar with. And he was talking about original love, original thinking, and original politics,
Mm.
are three books that he's written. And it was incredibly profound and wonderful. And then I went to a meeting of the U.S. Values Alliance, and they're talking values. They picked six: um, fortitude, compassion, trust, hope, and honor, honesty, and honesty. And it's just such a shallow conversation because there's no relationship. There's no relationship of those values to their life, which would be
Was the
interesting.
conversation that they were having was shallow, or the general public?
They've been together for a while. They came out of We All, which is a group of people that are trying to make a difference on a global scale. They do a lot of work with the UN. So the U.S. Values Alliance came out of this UN context formulation. And as I understand it, they're trying to create conversations around values, but they're not doing conversations around values. They converse amongst themselves, they pick values and so this year they're trying to take action, and we're talking about what that looks like. And anyway, so it was just I'm having trouble really relating to the group, and that's part of the reason why there's no context, there's no there to relate to. And their use of values is very different than mine. So in my world, honesty and fortitude, which is one of those, are two of the values they picked, belong to different value systems. So they're in conflict, actually. And then compassion, trust, and hope are um, emerging conditions that happen when you do other things correctly. And so it's just a real different conversation. So I don't know what to do about that in terms of any sort of really lasting working or relationship.
Yeah,
It just doesn't. So I'm kind of talking myself out of being involved with that group. I like the idea. I like what they could do, but they're certainly not doing enough that it makes it worth my time, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear more about that, but I have to get ready for a Zoom. And also, if you make a note about this, the idea that you like the other thought that you had to build upon.
Which other thought? The one I couldn't remember?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, I do. I love, I'm really attracted to values. Understanding what we value, but the work that I have done on nature's values just so is head and shoulders above anything else, in my view, that I've come across. And it's just so hard for people to get their arms around. Talk about perspectives and points of view.
Yeah. Well, I
Yes.
mean, the first thing I always, and I was thought about it several times in this conversation, was this, for me, the discovering this question about perspective is, that it revealed that, our world is filled with assumptions that that um
Yep.
that we think are God given, that
Yep.
control us.
Yep. Yep.
That's part of the book we're gonna write. Anyways.
There you go. Okay,
Thanks.
we'll talk later.
Bye bye.
Okay.